All right, class is in session. I saw this. I thought of this one the other day while doing another podcast. I forgot about this. This is the Solid Ground podcast. This is episode number 138. I'll copy and paste the full episode in the description if you want to go watch it. And also subscribe to Solid Ground podcast. This one's called How Women Contribute to Societal Collapse. I saw it was a really good one. And Dr. Danny Sulikowski is their guest. Dr. Danny Sulikowski has done numerous podcasts in like a short amount of time. She seemed to be doing like a sprint through a bunch of podcasts, but the information was all similar. And basically she's talking about how women are contributing to societal collapse. It's not like a hit piece on women. It's just basically this is what happens in human evolution. And doesn't have a political or bias towards any gender. She just takes the information and she's telling us about it. So anyway, it's quite interesting. I'll let her describe it. But this young lady, her husband, I believe, is a doctor, PhD probably, and he apparently did a podcast with her the day before, and now she's come on to correct the record because she didn't like kind of the information that she heard. So she's brought her feminist friends, this lady, and they're not bad, but I think this is the first time they're hearing the information, and this young lady just plays with her camera the whole time. But she's very, and this is Dr. Danny Sulikowski over here, and she's very smart. But anyway, let's listen to it, and I'll comment a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Hello, I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I'm speaking today with Jennifer Friend, Christine Siefenwalk, and we have a guest with us today, Dr. Danny Sulikowski. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's lovely to speak with you. I listened with interest to your conversation with Benjamin Boyce, who's also my husband, and I thought that it was really fascinating, your theories on reproductive suppression, and I'm skeptical of some of the areas that you see, but I'm really glad to actually have it.
She's skeptical because she didn't like the information being relayed. And so you're going to see her try to change the information with her, kind of her paradigm. But it's not going to work. And this is ladies not liking what they hear, and they have a hard time dealing with it. But anyway, let's go.
Directly with you and ask you some of the questions that came up for me when I was...
She hated the sound of the information being given so much to her husband, she had to come on herself.
And I'm sure Jennifer and Christine are probably likewise curious to ask you lots of questions. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
These other ladies that didn't like what you said.
So you've been doing the rounds quite a bit. Lots of people are curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, as it turns out people think this stuff is really kind of quite interesting. So it's been, it's been an interesting couple of months.
Well, I bet. And I don't want to hog everybody's all the time, but I will say one of the things that I've thought for a long time is that obviously we have reproductive suppression going on. Obviously. I mean, this even when I can remember...
The numbers are the numbers, right?
Mom telling me about how she felt shamed for having 3 kids. She was called a breeder. I mean, this was too much.
But what she's going to miss here, the lady on top, her mom was called a breeder for having 3 kids, whatever. But this goes way beyond her mom. It's been in effect. You're going to hear her describe it, but this has been going in effect a lot longer than your mom, and you'll hear her describe it. But this lady seemed to think that society is shaming women, and her mom got shamed, so this is contributing to it. Like feminism is contributing to it. It's a lot deeper than that. Let's go.
It's supposed to be at replacement levels only, and this was back in like the 70s and early 80s. So there was already this kind of like, you're selfish for wanting to have, what's now considered a big family, which, a long time ago would have been a really modest family size. So we definitely have a lot of reproductive suppression going on. We've got the climate change policies, which tell you basically, why would you even have kids?
Yep.
But also humans are a scourge on the planet. Clearly some of every girl is on birth control. from her teen years. That's a norm now.
Because girls like to bang. Why would girls be on birth control? Why would all girls be on birth control? Because they like to bang.
Young girls on birth.
So that, and I don't mean that, but women often say it's not all about sex. It's not all about sex. Look how much women like to bang. See that they their language exposes them.
Medications. Abortion is another form of birth control that people fight for and really want access to. And we prioritize women's higher education. And I've heard this argued. I went to a lecture when I was in college where an author was arguing that women's higher education was a great solution to population control because it keeps women tied up.
You're going to hear these things, right? But what further bothers this woman is that women are actually working against each other to suppress births. And that's what she's not going to like. All this feminist blah, blah, blah that we've talked about a lot, that's okay. But she's not going to like the fact that women are actually working against each other. So, and she thinks it's a knock on women's nature. And it really isn't. It's just that this is all happening subconsciously. But she thinks that it's a bad mark on her gender. It's not. But anyway, you'll hear. Let's go.
In education through their reproductive years. And then when they come out, they have a career and they just don't want to have as many children. So this is what we need to be doing. We need to be educating women. Not because education really benefits women or society, but because it reduces population. So I agree with that premise wholeheartedly. But where I do see it as a function of centralization of power more than intersexual competition. And
you're going to see the doctor have a problem with this. See, she's going to make it a centralization of power, blah, blah, blah. She's already come up with her paradigm. The doctor's not going to agree. Watch the doctor's face.
More of a function of intersexual competition. And so that's kind of, I'm really curious about why you think that. And when you said that you've seen this pattern repeat throughout history, where can you point to some examples? And I'll let you.
This is what women love to do. Point to examples. I know you gave facts. I know you gave but I want examples. I want hard line examples. She still won't want to believe it. This is just, she wants further confirmation of this fact that she doesn't like.
Here I'm like over talking, but
because she doesn't like it. And anyway.
I was one of the biggest examples of population control, reproduction suppression in modern memory is the Chinese one-child policy. Mm-hmm. I was really surprised to find out that
more about government, but not about women's nature. Intersexual competition is what she's not going to like.
At least half of those people were women. So I would have thought this was a panel of men. But the people who held up that panel, who decided on the family planning laws, it looks like it was equally women.
So it wasn't gender bias.
So that's kind of interesting to me.
Interesting, huh?
The
lady on the bottom left, she just messes with her camera the whole time.
To hearing some of these thoughts, and I'm just curious, what do you base this theory on?
So I think in terms of the intersexual competition angle, so I'm an evolutionary psychologist, so the way I try to understand human behavior is to understand the human social system as an evolved system. So evolved systems look very much like designed systems. They become tweaked over a very long time. They become quite complex, and the different components end up fitting together in ways that look like one component would need the other part in order to be adaptive, and so they have to co-evolve along together, sort of thing, in order to work. And so I don't want to preempt necessarily any of the arguments that you're going to make, but one of the responses that I have to this sort of suggestion that this is not so much evolutionary but it's cultural is that those two explanations are not in conflict with each other. So if evolution is going to select for mechanisms that will produce particular types of behavior, those mechanisms have to have some way of impacting behavior. Behavior doesn't just come out of nowhere. So evolution will select for certain cultural biases and things like that. So we will see proximate cultural explanations for behavior, but that still doesn't explain why those cultural aspects exist in the first place. And that's where it sort of, I guess, brings in the other question you asked about where else in the world that we see this, or where else across time, perhaps more importantly and more convincingly, do we see this? Because that is one of the, what I think is sort of, it's one of the really important parts of whether or not the theory will prove to be robust and viable. The more we interrogate other cultures, other circumstances, and other time points, because in order for it to hold up, it has to be the case that this is effectively a repeating pattern. It has to be the case that this is a circumstance that is not peculiar to us, it's not peculiar to the West, it's not peculiar to this point in time, it's not peculiar to social media or any of the other sort of very new phenomena that people often want to use as, really strong determinants of human behaviour. So, we currently have a well-recognised mental health crisis, especially amongst women, especially amongst young women, and especially amongst young women who lean towards the left. And social media is often held up as the reason for that. Oh, they're spending too much time on TikTok and Instagram and whatnot, which to me is not an especially convincing explanation at all. It doesn't really explain why social media should necessarily cause that amount of mental health problems. It doesn't explain why it would specifically, maybe it does to some extent explain why it might be women, because women do spend more time on social media than young boys, and they do different things on social media to what young men do. So social media does potentially account for some sex differences, but it very poorly accounts for political orientation differences, and there are huge political orientation differences in the current mental health crisis. And the reason why I've kind of picked up on social media and mental health as an example is because I also think that is one of the phenomena that is then accounted for by the observation that I'm putting forward, that what we're seeing is intense levels of female manipulative reproductive suppression. It's a form of intersexual competition, and I think if you
female manipulative reproductive suppression. Female manipulative reproductive suppression. So intersexual competition. So it's between the gender of female, and they are manipulating each other to suppress reproduction.
Levels of intersexual competition, that's going to cause stress and anxiety and things like that. And we do see this.
So this reproductive suppression is causing the depression and anxiety in the women. And the fact that women use social media more is just a kind of a product of that.
This mechanisms of manipulative reproductive suppression playing out much more strongly on the left than on the right, which is why abortion rights are a left-wing issue. It's why it's much more the right and the conservative that are pro-marriage and pro-children and things like that. So the left-right political divide is not an arbitrary thing that arises in our cultures or.
So the left is more for reproductive suppression, so women are more in line with the left, and but this all is between women, not men.
In democracies or anything like that, it's somewhat of a human universal. And what I actually think it is a reflection of how people's sexual strategies change over the course of the rise and fall of the civilization. So the conservative and the right wing represents the most adaptive sexual strategies when civilizations are young and growing. And
so the conservative / Republican for Americans is when societies are young, that's when they adapt those kind of policies. When societies tend to be in collapse. They adapt the left-leaning, progressive side of societies.
And the progressive left wing represents the most adaptive strategies when civilizations are declining. Because civilizations thrive before they decline, we see the conservatives being sort of, the side of politics that is seen as being behind, and the progressives the side of politics is seen being in front. And so even though, yes, I'm sure
Societies thrive before they decline. So they'll be Republican/conservative in the beginning, then they'll switch to a progressive type politics and be towards the left as they decline. So that's what they're saying. We're already involved in that now.
there are, a huge, a very large number of proximate contributors to birth rate decline, and we can see it. People point to the economic benefits and the manipulation of world economies by the elites and all sorts of things. But I don't think any of those proximal mechanisms by which a civilization changes to become a place that is very hostile to reproduction, nevertheless is a challenge to the explanation of why civilizations go through these phases and become hostile to reproduction.
So what she's saying is a lot of the people like your Andrew Tate and all that, the Matrix and the elites were the ones causing these problems and, causing reproductive decline. You'll hear that feminists are causing reproductive. But what she's saying is all societies go through this and they become very against or suppressive against reproduction beyond the fact that, elites and Matrix and this is just a normal, natural, kind of phase.
That's an explanation of how it happens, the mechanisms by which it happens, but it still isn't an explanation for why this keeps happening. And so I don't think that there's not a contradiction there. It's just different levels of explanation. How is this mechanistically actually playing out versus why does it play out mechanistically that way in the first place? And so the explanations go together actually quite well. They're not competing. They're adding a fuller explanation to the phenomenon that we're seeing. I'm not quite sure if that answers your question.
Well, I would certainly agree, and I think your point is well made about culture and evolution not being mutually exclusive.
Well, her point's well made because she does this for her job and she studies it and she's a PhD in this. So yeah, and you're just a doctor's wife.
That's definitely, and I think that this phasic cyclical process of growth and decay, the way that you're explaining that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that it even opens up some perspective for me that is really useful, and I'm going to continue to chew on. I do think it makes a lot
chew on, but not accept yet.
To equate the conservative sort of, if you just generally want to lump it in there, with the growth phase and the progressive with the decay phase. That makes sense. One of the things that I know, this is one of the talking points that gets thrown around a lot, is that women's intersexual competition involving a lot more like backstabbing and sabotage and like sneaky
Yeah, sounds terrible, doesn't it? Sounds like women might be jerks. It's just their nature, and men have a bad nature too.
Things, men's being more direct, and this.
Which would men are direct in your face, and women tend to be more, conniving. Yeah, because they're the vulnerable sex.
No, I'm speaking really sloppy and generally, but we hear all the time that we live in an age where we're seeing a lot more female violence, if you will, female, not violence in terms of like fighting, but intersexual competition. And I have argued that because of centralization and bureaucratization and the direct power being taken away from citizens in a lot of our countries and in a lot of our societies, you've had a direct attack on the ability of citizens to use direct confrontation as a means to solving problems, for better and for worse. I was reading a Twitter post the other day where a guy is like talking about how somebody did something really rude to his girlfriend, and he would have loved to have just punched the guy, but he didn't want to be in jail for 25 years. So there's an example. You can't handle your problems in that way when the alpha gorilla stands over you and says, I'll kill you if you use violence. So I think that there's something going on more systemically with the concentration of power that eliminates some of those channels for direct confrontation. And this forces everybody, both men and women, into more of those passive aggressive
She's going to knock down this argument that she's trying to have to make women sound better.
strategies, the retaliation strategies, if you are going to be in competition with one another. And so I guess there's a lot of arguments that basically are man versus woman right now. That's really popular. It's all men's fault. It's the patriarchy. And then, it's all women's fault. It's feminism. And I really see something more of a dovetailing. I see all of us kind of experiencing this wave of cultural change and cultural evolution together. And then the way that we break down and the way that we experience that decay manifests in feminine and masculine ways differently, but we're all riding the wave together. And so I am just at the point where I become skeptical is when it's a specifically male or female strategy.
So I don't disagree, I think, with most everything that you said there. All of those observations are, for the most part, correct. I think that there is an overemphasis. I think there's always been an overemphasis on the extent to which men use physical violence for intersexual competition. I think men certainly use physical violence much more than women. I mean, they're much better adapted to it for a start. Their bodies can do it much more effectively than ours can, for sure. But actually, I think men use use physical violence much more for protection of women and children than they use it for
Men use physical violence much more for the protection of women and children. Interesting. And not for conflict. There you go.
Competition. And so
men are pretty cool guys, hey?
Also correct, 100% correct, that violence overall is going down. What my argument in response to that observation would be is that matches that violence going down overall is in line with the condemnation of masculinity more broadly. So the
condemnation of masculinity overall is why violence has gone down.
The phrase toxic masculinity, the invention of the patriarchy and then demonization of that patriarchy as to become like a catch-all explanation for everything. It's the patriarchy. Has been a very, very effective piece of propaganda, but it's largely nonsense. There are few, if any, objective measures of anything that would suggest that we have lived in a society for, potentially forever. But that we've lived in a society that
men and women have lived together forever, and this toxic masculinity has just become a problem, is what she said.
Automatically puts the benefits of men above women. That's just objectively untrue. We live in a society that
there's no such thing as putting the benefits among men above women. That's not true, she says.
The lives of women much more than it values the lives of men.
That society often values women over men.
It's the health of women much more than it values the health of men.
We value the health of women over men.
And that's always been the case, right? There's a reason.
There's always been the case because wombs are expensive.
The men died on the Titanic and the women and the children were saved. Right? There's nothing unusual about the Titanic. There's a reason why we send men off to...
Men and women first. Men go to war. Men are on the front lines. Women are protected. So we've always placed more emphasis on women's benefit.
And we don't send women off to war. And the reason why societies value women much more than they value men is because inherently women biologically are just much more valuable.
Women's wombs and having babies are much more valuable to societies than men's sperm.
send 90% of its men off to die in a war, and its population can recover in the next generation if few to none of its women die. If it sent 90% of its women off to war, it couldn't recover.
Yes, if you send 90% of your women off, then only 10% of your women can now have babies. If you send 90% of your men off, then 10% of men can still have the same amount of babies if 90% of your women are still around.
Many generations. So women are just more valuable. As you know, men are in a thriving, in a developing, growing, thriving society. Men are effectively expendable, and that's
men are expendable. Sperm is expendable. Wombs are not, because it takes 9 months to have a baby. But men can spot off sperm every day.
thriving societies treat men. They work them incredibly hard. Lots of men die in the workplace. Lots of men die in war. Lots of men die.
Men die in war, at work. So it seems like men's lives can be seen as harder.
Out to the frontiers to explore, to gain new territory. Men are
pioneers die when looking for new territory.
Thriving society, men are effectively expendable. Women are not. And so that is how society treats women. One of my favorite...
Non-emotional, non-feeling. It just is what it is. Men have a harder life and women sometimes have an easier life. It is what it is. It's not moral or immoral.
My favorite is probably not quite the right, probably not the right word. One of the examples that I like to pick up on is the claim that women often make that, you know, society spend much more money on male healthcare than it does on female.
So there is a hypothesis that society spends more on male healthcare than women's healthcare.
And it loves pointing to this paper that showed that 13% of sort of health budgets were spent on female-specific issues and touted that as evidence that, you know, so much more money is spent. That same paper showed that just 6% of budgets are spent on male-specific issues. The rest of it is spent on issues that are not sex-specific. So the exact paper that these feminists use and constantly...
So 13% of the budget was spent on women's, 6% of the budget was spent on men's, but overall, they, you know, men and women have a similar health problem. So, you know, it was non-sex specific. So women still got a 7% increase on, in that paper, on the health budget being contributed to them.
As evidence that governments only spend 13% of the health budget on women actually showed that it spends more than twice as much on women as it does on men. And that excluded anything to do with obstetrics and childbearing. So, of course, the differential would be much larger if you included that. And those statistics excluded that. So, you know, the objective evidence is clear, and it can be shown in any kind of domain. You can set up little psychological experiments where you sort of give people little vignettes and descriptions of sort of, you know, quite unlikely scenarios, like stuck in a little lifeboat in the middle of the ocean, and you get them to choose who gets thrown overboard. And it's very easy to show that in every kind of hypothetical scenario, the implicit value that people place on the life of a woman is much higher than the value that places on the life of men.
Women place more value on women, or I'm sorry, societies place much more value on women than men. And she said during that study, if you put people in the vignettes in like a lifeboat in the ocean, they're going to throw the man over, which is, again, it is what it is, you know, but it's killing her theory.
And that is reflected in every aspect of society. So the suggestion of a patriarchy is absolute nonsense. But I suspect I'm probably preaching to the converted on that. But the way I look at the decline in the social acceptability of violence, because one thing to remember about violence is that whilst it's very easy to demonize violence, you also have to remember that violence is often used to serve very important purposes.
Violence is also demonized, but it also has a very good function.
People who would have, well, maybe more so nowadays, I should probably qualify that statement. I would suspect there used to be very few people who would have been remotely bothered by a man going out and beating the holy shit out of someone who had sexually abused his children, for example. No one would think that that was an inappropriate or uncivilized use of violence. That's the kind of...
So a man could go and beat the crap out of someone who sexually abused his children. But now
Can't do anymore.
we can't do that anymore, and we think that that's bad violence. So I do think, maybe I'm radical here, but I like the old way better.
The connection that I see between the rise of the part of the tactics of the rise of reproductive suppression is the emasculation of men. And so we're seeing that, obviously, masculinity, you don't hear that word anymore without the word toxic in front of it. Not anywhere.
There's a rise of emasculation of men, for sure.
Mainstream press anyway. So it's just, masculinity now just is synonymous with things that are inherently bad. We've got, I don't know about in your part of the world, but certainly in my part of the world, there's regular, little news stories about some high school or even younger, even primary schools introducing, misogyny classes for all the young boys to teach them how to not grow up into sexual predators. Because, up until about 5 minutes ago, we broadly understood that the biggest risk factors of someone growing up to become abusive was them being abused as children, not being abusers as children. As not nice as childhood bullying might be, it's a largely normal behaviour for the most part. Obviously, it can get very extreme, but for the most part, it's largely normal, and it's kids working out their own social dominance hierarchies. And it's not the bullies that grow up to become the abusers. The kids who go on to become abusive as adults are the kids who were abused, typically by a caregiver themselves. They're the ones who grow up to be.
So all this bullying and anti-bullying campaigns and all that, what she's saying is it's not those kids that were bullies. That's just normal, social dominance going on. And a lot of these schools, progressive schools, we're trying to tell kids not to be bullies, but that's just normal socialization. What she's saying is it's normally if those caregivers of those bullies are abusing the kids, the abusers are abused kids are the ones that are causing abuse in the future. And just because the kid's a bully doesn't mean he's been abused.
Genuinely abusive adults. So if you think you're going to do something about domestic violence and violence against women and children by giving young boys anti-misogyny classes, you're not going to do anything about that at all. There's zero impact on the problem that you're purporting to want to solve with that. What we are seeing, though, is an masculinization, or that's even a word, of men. And so we're seeing it in male testosterone levels. So over the decade,
men are being turned into biatches, and you're seeing their testosterone levels go down. That's why I'm a big proponent of TRT. Check with your doctor first if you're over 30 or 35. I can't remember which one it is, but check with your doctor, see if TRT is what you need to be on.
Testosterone levels are quite substantially dropping across the population. We're seeing
anyone that's seen the change in clavicular, it was done by high doses of testosterone, high doses of anabolic steroids and growth hormone. So that's all he used. That's it. So, and it looks like he's done pretty well for himself. So it's worked. So, but talk to your doctor, look at your legal laws in your area, make sure you're safe, make sure it's healthy, and make sure it's legal. But check out those avenues.
Of everything masculine, but specifically of masculine ways of engaging in any kind of social dominance. So anything masculine is now demonized, and anything that is feminine is being, whatever the opposite of demonized is, angelized. And the effects of that is that female ways of getting the same results, so female methods of intimidation and social manipulation, which is how women get the same results, because women don't have, for the most part, the option of just going and flattening.
So females' intimidation, because of the vulnerable sex, they don't have they can't just, flatten you over. So like I've shown on my channel, the text messaging, the psychological battles, and I've shown in a lot of my other videos how they argue, the psychological win. That is the female's game.
It's not something in our repertoire, so we have to have other skills when we need to socially hold particular people in line. Those methods are now being lauded as appropriate and frequently being abused. But the tactics that women use, and the tactics, I guess, that nasty women are then able to exploit to sort of rather to the, police bad behaviour, but to kind of control the people around them inappropriately, that's kind of all okay because it's not violent. What society is demonising is what males do.
Yeah, if you can shame men, if you can shame people, if you can use their tactics, that you can change the cultural way that things are done. But to yell at somebody or to be violent, that's bad. But females are covert.
That means males
You're the man that stepped up. You're not the stepdad.
can't do anything because males aren't good at the social manipulative games that women are good at. Males are good at going out and sorting problems pretty quickly with problematic people, but they can't do that anymore. And so that's what I think
Men are good at solving problems with problematic people quickly, but they're not allowed to do that anymore. I'm just kind of, rehashing, because she talks kind of fast and she's very smart.
This decline in male violence and what you're sort of framing as it's coming from this sort of centralization of control. But I think it's not just about the centralisation of control, it's who's influencing that control centre. And who is influencing that control centre is increasingly women.
Who is centralizing the control of what's accepted in society? That's increasingly women.
We're seeing more and more women in these decision-making positions in sometimes increasingly in sort of the hard power positions as well, in the overt leadership positions, but frequently in the soft power positions. So women in the bureaucracies, women in the universities, in education, in health, women in all the positions where they're able to have influence over, in journalism is a massive one, where they're able to have influence.
Women in politics, in journalism, and that's the soft power positions where they start controlling the narrative of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
The social narratives and the social priorities and the social agenda. Women have been setting the social agenda for a very long time, if not forever. Even when they set that social agenda from the kitchen where they were barefoot and pregnant, they've been setting the social agenda for a very long time.
Women have been setting the social agendas for a long time.
And thinking
even when they were barefoot and pregnant.
That it's men who have been setting that agenda, I think, is falling for a little bit of a head fake. Women have been setting the agenda for a long time, and it is suiting
the thing that are saying that men have been setting the agenda is a head fake or a head pump, like they do in football.
Reproductive suppression goals very well. So one thing that led me sort of down the path of thinking about female intersexual competition and reproductive suppression from just being, an explanation for just female behaviour. So just, in individual groups or one-on-one, just looking at how, women will do that and that has that outcome and that's interesting, and we can measure that and we can show that the women that are more competitive are more likely to do that, that's interesting as well. What took it from that kind of level of explanation of behaviour out to a broader society level was just thinking about the consequences of, what if, large numbers of women did this? What would then be the social effects? What would be the emergent social system that we would see if we started seeing these types of things happening en masse? Because we are now starting to see these types of things happening en masse. So, what used to be so just advice giving is probably a great explanation, a great example, So we do have data showing that women will give reproductively inhibiting advice to other female friends. So
giving advice to their female friends will be reproductively suppressive.
And the women who self-report being more intersexually competitive will be the ones that are more likely to give the more reproductively inhibiting advice. So if you give women sort of equivalent scenarios and you ask them what would you do versus you ask them what would you advise a friend of yours to do, well, the advice they give to the friend will be more reproductively inhibiting on average than what they indicate they themselves would do.
So they would give their friends more reproductive inhibiting advice than they would do themselves. This is very covert. This is very secretive, very manipulative, but it's not bad. And I know the lady up top in the right doesn't like it.
Difference is larger the higher these women are on intersexual competition. So
Interesting.
yeah, so
Interesting. I don't like that.
that from it within a kind
Can
of
I ask a question about that, Danny?
Uh-huh.
Is
That's
that
right.
reproductively inhibiting
Yeah, here she goes, not liking it.
advice that
advice.
is, but is it more, are you seeing that from people who are like, have you studied the differences between trying to inhibit the
She wants to make it a whole nother study. What she's basically saying is, over all the studies, it has been shown that women will give advice to other women and inhibit their reproductive, and will give advice that is reproductively suppressive. Now, this one wants to change the modality of the study.
of a family of an already established married woman, or are you talking about mating strategies? Because I see a lot of female intersexual competition, but I see it more in the short term in terms of like competing for attractiveness to potential man, catching the man or catching his attention.
Yeah.
Not so much in terms of women actually wanting to reduce the number of children that other women have.
That's what she just said. She just said women try to reduce the number of children by giving bad advice. It's not just sexual competition.
I think that sometimes a woman who's had children is considered safe to other women. Oh, good, she's off the market.
Women are never off the market.
Longer competition. In fact, she's losing her body, and she's it's
No, this is what these ladies don't understand. There's always competition among y'all.
go have 5 of them.
Oh my God, that's so dark.
I know,
Not so much. So,
Okay.
so the two studies I'm thinking of,
It's so dark. Yeah, they don't like their nature. It's okay. It's not a moral thing.
advice that we were targeting was around relationship formation, having children, and then the relative investments in children versus career. So having more children versus going back to the career and things like that. So it was in all of those contexts primarily, and one of them was focused entirely around the investment in children versus career kind of trade-off. The other one sort of had a broader span of the sort of reproductive life cycle, if you like. But most definitely, we're looking at post-mate bonding, manipulative reproductive suppression. Okay. So a lot of the research around intersexual competition has focused on that mate attraction arena. But it's also interesting, though, we also now have pretty good data from there showing that what women do specifically around makeup and adornments is not to impress men.
Mm-hmm. So women's makeup is not to impress men.
Actually ward off other women. So when
women's makeup is to ward off other women.
Dressed up in the hair and the makeup and the clothes, turns out men, not so much a fan.
We don't like makeup. We like natural beauty.
However, think that makes rivals look very attractive, and they also perceive those rivals as being quite aggressive as well. So when women are dolling themselves up and going out, they're not saying to men, look how attractive I am. They're saying to other women, get out of my way.
There is a dominance display.
That's
Women with makeup are showing a dominance display to other women.
Messages being sent. Men, for their role in all of this, actually think that stuff makes you less attractive. So women are actually imposing sort of wearing an attractiveness cost, if you like. They're imposing a cost on themselves. They're actually making themselves less attractive to the men they are trying to attract in order to signal to other women to stay out of their way. That's how those signals are actually working. And that's this idea of women sort of being convinced or consciously thinking that, what I'm doing is to make myself more attractive, but it's actually, those behaviours are actually serving signalling purposes to other women and not making them more attractive to men. That's a really recurring theme. So you see exactly the same thing with body weight. So women attempting to lose weight, thinking that they're trying to make themselves as attractive as possible. No, the male ideal weights in terms of attractiveness. So if you give like a male, like a little morphable female body and say, make this body as, make it the most attractive you can, they will make that female body heavier than what a woman would make it to make it as attractive as possible. So the male peak of attractiveness is heavier than what females think it is. So when women are attempting to make themselves super skinny, it's not, they may think that what they're doing is trying to make themselves more attractive, but that's not what they're doing at all. What they're actually doing is responding to intersexual competition from other women that are setting body standards that are imposing attractiveness costs on other women. So
isn't it also neoteny? I mean, there's also that.
All right, she's going to want to bring up something else, and she's going to get shot down.
That they're trying to make themselves look younger. And that a younger woman between 17 and 21 is going to have a different body shape than a woman once she's about 30. Everybody spreads and broadens.
To some extent, but most of the eating disorder stuff we see is in that 17 to 21 and in fact younger range. These women are not trying to make themselves look younger.
So once again, it is women focusing on women and women suppressing the birth rate, not, neoteny it. She wants to bring up all these other things, and it's like, no, it's just your nature to do this.
For the most part, you wouldn't want to look younger. In fact, women in that age range are typically trying to make themselves look older.
Yeah, exactly.
14, 15-year-old
She's like, isn't it neoteny that women just want to look younger? No, actually, in that age group, they want to look older. So, I mean, she's just cracking her arguments. It's okay. You women are you can be harsh sometimes, and it's okay. It's not, again, so can men.
Talking about like all the way to eating disorder, not just diet culture.
Oh yeah, all the way down to eating disorder. So
not just diet culture. So again, you're trying to bring in something. No,
I'm not this isn't necessarily sort of my ideas. Other people have written about this as well, as eating disorders as intersexual competition, and there's really good evidence that it is. And so what women are doing by setting these attractiveness standards, so they love blaming this mythical patriarchy for setting these unrealistic attractiveness standards. Nonsense.
Yeah, men usually like the fatter women, not obese, but just a little extra meat on their bones.
They're attempting to meet male attractiveness standards. They would be heavier. They wouldn't be wearing makeup, and they wouldn't be wearing, revealing, sexy clothing. So, they'd be doing very, very different things if they were actually attempting to meet male attractiveness standards compared to what we actually see women doing. What they are doing is they are meeting the physical appearance standards that are set by other women. And other women set these physical appearance standards in order to impose attractiveness costs on their rivals. So you can think of it.
Women set these appearance standards to impose attractive costs on their rivals.
Like, the peacock, the male peacock has this great big giant tail, and it makes him look magnificent. However, if you're a male peacock who's not in great condition, then this great big giant tail becomes a massive advertisement that you're not in good condition, because the tail won't be in good condition and it will have be full of parasites, and every time you go to display it, you'll be displaying the fact that you're not in good condition. And also, if you're not big and strong and fast, you're just going to get eaten as well, because you've got this great big tail that you've got to carry around, and if you can't escape, I don't even know what eats peacocks, some large cat in Asia where these peacocks live. Jaguars, I guess, maybe no. Anyway, if you can't escape, then you're going to get eaten, right? And this is why the females like the males with the big tails, because number one, if they're still alive, well, that means they've been successfully escaping. That's good sign. And number two, the females can very well assess the quality of the males when he opens his tail, because if it's free of parasites, then he also must be...
Exactly, and that's why looks do matter. Looks, this is what she's talking about, and looks is an operation of the fitness, and I don't mean physical fitness. I've said this in my other videos, go look at those, but it's the fitness of your health, the fitness of your genes, how healthy you are. That tail of the peacock being very colorful and big shows that he has good genes and he's healthy.
A reliable sign that he's going...
Just like a man is when he's considered hot or sexy or good looking.
And healthy and whatnot. And women are doing the same thing to other women with body shape ideals, with fashion, with even things like the things that women are doing now with their faces, the fillers and the things like that. Men don't find any of that stuff
correct
attractive at all. Not a bit of it. Not remotely.
What about the influence of pornography on?
Oh, here we go.
These feelings in young women. I mean, there's a lot of display of particular types of
You're gonna get shot down again. No, women are saying, "Oh, you look better with a big filler in your lips," and men go, "No." And "Oh, you look good with filler in your cheeks," and men go, "No." And now this lady wants to say that pornography that men watch, again, it's going to be men's fault. That it's going to be that is influencing women's how women look, and no, it's not. Women don't care how porn stars look.
that you see. And this is increasingly causing a lot. I mean, I've seen and
Blame it on men and porn here. Nope, it's not it, lady.
heard stories of young women who are choosing a trans or non-binary identity, partly because they're so intimidated by what they see represented as femalehood and what the ideals that are represented in early exposure to pornography is a big part of that.
Oh, please.
It is a big part of that. It's also the whole, not necessarily to some extent the trans, but the non-binary phenomenon is a little bit different. I mean, it's a lower bar for entry in terms of what the person has to do. So it's less costly social signal to adopt a non-binary identity. But I think that is also wrapped up in intersexual competition as well. So what you've got with these non-binary trends, if you've got women, doing a whole bunch of things that are deliberately making themselves unattractive. And what that is that's a submissiveness signal to other women. If dolling yourself up and making yourself is super attractive becomes a dominant signal that's perceived as aggressive, then doing the exact opposite yourself to yourself.
Could it be a non-competition signal rather than submissive? Like, I opt out of this.
Submissive. I think
No.
they're kind of much the same thing, right?
You're saying the same thing.
But you've got sort of the competition continuum, and at one end you've got sort of the aggressive dominance, and the other end you've got the submissiveness signals, right? So in terms of the mating market, effectively what those women are signaling is that they're not currently in it, right? So they're actively signaling to the rest of the women that they're not going to be presenting a threat in that regard. But yeah, so the adoption of all of these body adornments and things, they're imposing costs. The more attractive you are, the more you can get away with doing things that are ostensibly going to make you a little bit unattractive.
The more attractive you are, you can get away with doing things that are more unattractive, like putting makeup on and stuff like that and fillers, and you can get away with that and show a dominance to women and still be attractive to men. Anyway, I'm going to stop it there. We're getting too long here, and I'm going to do a part 2. So just wait for part 2.